Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. I want to start by thanking everyone for their patience and understanding. There's been a bit of a lag between the last episode and this one. I've been handling some personal and family issues, and I didn't want to rush the next episode out just to keep pace. Literally and figuratively, spinning plates takes practice and perseverance, and the self-awareness that if you push the limit of your physical and mental ability too far, that the plates you break could be costly or irreplaceable. Health, family, unity, finances, critical job skills, friendships, and the responsibilities we choose to take on. One person can do a lot, but a lot isn't everything. Balancing too many things precariously or balancing what is manageable extremely well have very different longevities. This mindset takes a makeup of practicality, passion, adaptability, and acceptance, but the workload is still limited. If you want to do more, you need others. This increases efficiency, productivity, success, and joy at the cost of adding interpersonal dynamics to the mix. This is the big picture that leaders see and address so well. My guest this episode embodies and embraces the journey of leadership. We discuss work ethic, mentors, family, how sports and competition are synonymous with firefighting, and the experience of losing a crew member. He is instructed in the areas of live fire, driving, and mental health, and stands beside our membership on the Honor Guard, the Benevolent Committee, and handling WSIB cases. It's a privilege to call him a friend and my captain. Here's my discussion with Rob Senay. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Scott.
How's it going?
Good, you?
Good, good. So we worked a shift last night.
Yes.
Wasn't too bad.
No, it was okay. It was
Yeah.
a good day.
Couple calls late, but we got a little bit of downtime.
Yeah, important.
And on to the second coffee.
You are. This is my first.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we should be able to make it for a couple hours and stay cognizant and clear.
You got me for 20 minutes.
Okay. All right. I'll make the best of it. So I was actually talking to one of our crew last night about how we came up and how our work ethic was established early on. Let's start with that. When did you start working? And what jobs did you do before the fire service?
Yeah, I was working, I don't know, I was like 12 or 13, cutting lawns and snow blowing driveways. It sounds bizarre. And no, I didn't buy the snowblower. It was my parents had one. So entrepreneurial enough that you start to see a little bit of an opportunity and then a little bit of freedom by gaining some money. And then it kind of went from there. So full-time jobs, it was like 16, 17 that I was into the workforce kind of deal. And a bit of a grind, I guess, because I was still playing high-level baseball and high-level hockey. So some of those I could parlay, if you will. Playing hockey, I was instructing at goalie schools, international goalie schools, and that sort of thing. So those would fill your summers. And then, yeah, when you were in the actual real workforce, all the way along, I had 2 jobs. I think I know how to work.
Were you pretty smart with the money you were making early on? Was that taught to you by your parents, or were you sort of given free rein to make bad decisions initially and figure it out?
Yeah, you had enough trivial little decisions that you'd spend stuff on inappropriately, but I always kind of was gearing it towards some sort of an education, and that was kind of our agreement too, that they were going to pay for a chunk of my education, but so was I. So it wasn't like, yeah, you can go out and do whatever you wanted, but it did give you the freedom, but I was putting money away. And older siblings, my sister for sure, she was telling me to put my money away. So
How many brothers and sisters?
one sister, one brother. My sister's in between Mike and I.
And you have a lot of family in the fire service.
I do.
So run down that list for me.
So my sister's husband, he's on Richmond Hill. And my brother-in-law, he's on the fire service as well. He, ironically, was kind of searching for a career at 19 years old. And we still had the ride-along program. So I brought him one day, put him through his paces. He went in the tower with us, like way above and beyond any NFPA regulation that we would have now. We had probably one of the hottest burns you could imagine. Like, yeah, it was pretty eye-opening for him, but he got hooked and followed my path. And so it's pretty cool to develop him in a way and see the trials and tribulations he got on as a volunteer and helped him with the interviews and all those sorts of things. And then he eventually got hired, went to his graduation. And So it's pretty cool. He's on our shift too, so it's easy to line up. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Your dad and your brother.
Yeah, the close side of the family, yeah. My dad was 47 years in the service. So he was 17 years as a firefighter, attendant at the time, that's what they called it. Then he made a switch up this way into the GTA to the OFM, and then eventually was a fire chief for another 22 years. So he'd always said that he had 3 different careers. So I kind of believe it. I kind of see that. And that kept him going in different avenues for that length of time. And he still loved his job to the day that he left. So pretty fortunate to have that surrounding and see, that kind of life. And then my brother got on.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, him and I were in the same hire.
Yeah.
He got on just a few years before you.
Yeah. So it's pretty ironic that I knew who you were just from Mike's class alone, but seeing your graduation was pretty riveting too. You guys were demoing the helmet thermal imaging cameras, and it was a live demonstration through the command post. You guys did a scenario. Like, I remember every little sequence of the whole thing. So pretty influential because I was 17 at the time and kind of searching around for different avenues as to what I was going to do. Like, why wouldn't I do this? But now you look at it, it's like, why wouldn't you? But there was different factors there where I was thinking of police, just a different emergency service, but I was definitely influenced by one of my hockey coaches as well. But it was actually him that said, why wouldn't you consider the fire service like your father, right? And like, okay, yeah.
Because he was on police. Was he?
The hockey coach
Yeah.
was. Yeah. So we were 12, 13 at the time. And he was with OPP, and he took us to their detachment, the whole team. So we had a whole day there with them, did a tour. We had to do a scenario, each one of us. It was wild. It was a lot of fun. So you had a screen in front of you. You had a gun on your belt, and they ran you through one by one. Nobody knew what you were getting into. So you had to do a traffic stop, and the guy would get out with a gun or without. So you had to make the call as to whether you were going to shoot or not, kind of thing.
I didn't realize that was available, because I know it's available now. I didn't know that tech has been around that long, that VR interactive.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was, and it was older school, right? It was a projection screen or whatever it was, but it was pretty engaging, right? For all of us to go through that. And I was like, wow, this is really neat. So I approached him later and was really considering the police service. I mean, I was kind of thinking of different things and had lots of talks. And then he said, why don't you consider the fire service like your father was? And okay, yeah. So, and the rest is history. I mean, my dad talked about it, driving all over Southern Ontario for baseball or hockey, and he just would kind of put it out there, but he never pushed it on me at all. So,
Right.
yeah.
So you were just encouraged to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But he did gently expose you to the
Yeah.
possibility.
Not in a direct way. Like, we knew what Dad did, and he was a lot of the times the on-call chief as the deputy before he became the chief. So oftentimes, like a volunteer, the phone would ring and he would have to leave because it was a major event. I knew that if he left, the odds were I would see him on the 11 o'clock news doing the speech for whatever event had occurred. I can recall a time, again, when we were playing baseball middle of summer, and we were coming back from somewhere down in the city, and they called him, and he's like, do you want to go to the scene? And I was like, yeah.
Heck yes.
I don't really have a choice.
Right.
So we went, and they were constructing the 407, and there was the dump truck had its back up and flipped over. So it was a big kind of extrication involved, and I was on the outskirts, so I couldn't really understand what was going on. I knew where we were, and my dad had meandered down to talk to them and kind of see if they needed anything, this sort of thing. But so those were events where I definitely remember the fire service or being in that arena, right, and kind of seeing it all unfold. So it's pretty neat.
So almost away from the sort of the fantasy version that you may have in your head of like not only what the media portrays it as, but then what you think your dad's doing, and then sort of seeing it play out in real time. This is what an actual response looks like.
Yes. And even further to that, when we were younger, when he was with the OFM, he would bring the truck home, the training truck home. So it was all wonderful in the neighborhood. You imagine a giant fire truck outside of your house for overnight because he was taking it somewhere to train. So you saw that end of it, and then he took me once to back home where I was born, because they were putting on an extrication demonstration, and I rode with him for 4 hours in the captain's seat, if you will. And
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, right. In this fire truck all the way down. So I got to visit family because we were down there, but he was putting on an event with this particular apparatus. So it was really neat to see that. And then the synergy wraps itself back to me going to the fire college as a volunteer. And there was the struck. I was like, oh my gosh. And the battery died on it when I was using it. It was awesome. It's like, we had such a good run, and it was right there, right?
Did you bark at him the whole way like you bark at me when I'm driving for you?
Right. I had a huge pillow with me. It wasn't very, it was a bumpy seat. I was asleep. Like, he would tell a story well. I've seen Southern Ontario, and I think everything's 10 minutes away because I sleep constantly, right? So, wow, we're here. Yeah.
So that hasn't changed on the way to calls either.
Exactly.
You think all the responses are 30 seconds long.
Exactly.
You're a really good driver.
Yeah. Man, that was quick.
It's quick. So with all that exposure to fire, had you thought about police more just to sort of blaze your own trail and not do exactly what your dad was doing? Was that a thought, or were you just sort of being exposed to different emergency services? And
yeah, that's hard to tell. I don't know if I knew about the fire before the police interaction. My mom likes the criminal end of things. She likes, the criminal mind kind of stuff. So I don't know if I would pick some of that up. I would say I would pick some of that up from her. I mean, even right up to this day, I was accepted to go to university for criminology, and that's I was like, oh, maybe not. And I was glad I held off doing what obviously is a great job, and I think it would have been fine there too. But both of those kind of were in my scope for sure. So
with her obviously comfort level with so many people in emergency services, I'm sure, as parents, sure even your dad, you have these concerns for your kids because the dangers are involved. But did she ever express, after the fact that she's glad you're on fire and not carrying a gun? If you had to compare the dangers?
I think she's just proud that we're on the service too. But she worries about us just the same. She knows that there's inherent dangers, and you look back to me growing up, my dad still has a picture of him rescuing somebody out of a window. He has the paper clipping, and he's passed out handing this kid off. The kid had ripped his face piece off in the fire. And so my dad got him to the window and got overcome by it all, and, was rewarded, all that good stuff. So I could see that. And then I can see, of course, my mom's fear as well. So, which is rightfully so, because you're seeing it right in front of you. So
that's the reality.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was your path to getting hired? You started out as a volley?
Yeah, I was 20 years old, applied to the same volunteer department where my brother was too. And he had just got on the career department. The chiefs at the time knew who my dad was, of course, and knew Mike as well. But I look back at it, and they gave me a pretty good break, and they were really good with me. But I was showing, the maturity and that sort of thing, that I was willing to handle this. And ultimately, you're wanting to get on full time. But I was hooked. I really was hooked when that started. The training started. We got to go to the fire college. Like, they did a really good job with us, and we would go commit to the weekends. And it was months of doing that, and then leading into the fire college. So we were prepared with our skills. Did a couple weekends of training there and evolutions up there. So knowing that, and then you finally got your pager, it was like, wow, this is it. This is really where I want to be. So then my focus even further to that turned to going to college, to the pre-service program. Like everybody else does, you write and you may not get in, and so it worked out. I wasn't too far out of the volunteer, getting a pager, getting trained up, that I was quick to go to Humber thereafter.
And working two jobs,
playing junior hockey. Yeah.
Taking courses,
yeah. A partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah.
So that's all good stuff.
But that was probably seen by your volley crews, right? And your captains, that you were the sponge mentality.
Yes.
you're committed. So then you're also eager to feed you.
And they were, because they had a municipality with 3 smaller departments, and we did all our training together. So I had one friend of mine on a career now as well, but he went to Humber. He was basically a year ahead of me for everything. He got hired a year ahead of me, all of those things. So I was kind of seeing what he was doing and following those footsteps at the same time as our training was going on, which at the start was a gong show, because I look back at it. I soaked myself with a hose incorrectly once when we were just in the infancy of our training. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But then fast forward after Humber, after all the courses, everything I had taken, I remember going to a call, and the guy that was in my class, he turned around. He's like, holy cow, you've come a long, long way. And I was like, yeah, we're putting gear on. I'm throwing ladders. I'm doing the job. Not running calls, but you're training every single day. And he was at a different stage in his life. He was, an older gentleman, but all those guys, even the older guys that were in my recruitment, they all kind of took me under their wing. And I remember them really looking out for me. And we went to the fire college. So super positive that way. And they all knew, what I was kind of after. But I was full in raising money. Like, it was a whole different world. We didn't have all the luxuries that we do with the full-time service. I mean, we had a 2-stroke hydraulic system that we had to fundraise to get a proper set of. I was like, man, if the public only knew what we were dealing with here and what we were operating with. But we did it, and we had some really great other career guys there that mentored and developed, and they took the job seriously and did an awesome job with us. And a lot of them are chiefs now. A lot of them are chiefs in other departments, so it's kind of neat to see them. And I've met up with them again in other courses, and it's like, hey, so we talk about the old days kind of thing, right? So, yeah.
So this combination of having strictly volunteer firefighters and having some full-time involved in the volunteer service isn't necessarily a bad thing.
You leaned on them, and I mean, you had both volunteer captains and full-time volunteers that were captains too.
Yeah.
But you leaned on them, and they knew what they were doing for sure. When we had big events there. We had a small, tiny airfield in our area. We had marinas in the area. Like, we were dealing with some intense things. And when stuff was going south and those guys were there, it was like, I'm holding on to that guy. And you knew. And I'm giving all the credit to the volunteers too, because there were some really, really good ones as well.
Well, I just think it's a perfect synergy of the experience and the knowledge that, because volleys are usually in rural areas.
Yep.
And obviously careers are most often in cities, urban, right? So
yep.
That perfect synergy of everybody bringing something to the table, and you've got the perfect team.
It was. Yeah, it really, really was. And you could rely on a lot of great people there for sure. So,
were you trying to get on the same department as your brother? Were you trying everywhere?
Yeah, trying all over. So the times were a little different. There wasn't kind of the applicant pool or the testing pool. You went whoever was hiring. We tried local to our area, and they were hiring such a small amount, and just, couldn't crack that, 4 guys they needed or whatever it would be.
Out of the hundreds of applicants, sometimes
thousands, right? Yeah. So that was a job in itself, right? Saving up money up, go wherever you had to go, and then you start to get your resume beefed up enough that you're going to crack the lineup to even get an interview. I remember one interview, I was like, holy cow. It could have been over in 15 minutes.
Right.
Might as well walked out, right? But I got better at that, and I got right down to the wire with a couple places. I know why they hired what they were hiring from within their own volunteer, and that was fine. But I remember the one chief said to me, he kind of blew us out of the water. We weren't expecting you. We're going with our volunteers. And he said, if I didn't have to kind of lean to that, you were here. And I was like, okay.
That's good of him to give you that feedback.
And I knew I was close then, right? You knew you were in the game.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah. It was
so persistence, perseverance.
Yes.
Were there doubts along the way? Did your dad and your brother encourage you to keep plugging away?
They did. And then you start to doubt, do I need to go back to school? Do I need to find something else? Am I going to just keep doing what I'm doing here? And again, I'm giving up all my vacation, working 2 jobs, day and night basically, and giving up my vacation to get more and more and more on the resume. I spent the summer almost at the fire college getting everything I could under the sun. So then, yeah, you really do second guess. You know, you're making decent money, but that's not. It wasn't a lifestyle to work that much. It was an end game that you wanted, right? So I was fortunate that it worked out. But again, you knew you were going to be in the circuit, but when was it going to happen? So there is definitely doubts, and you got to keep positive. So
And you keep running into the same people doing all the same things that you are.
test after test, and I've had this conversation with some guys that I've helped now onto career departments, just doing interview prep, and they're banging their head off the wall, and it's like, okay, it's okay, you're all right, you're in this, and you got to add some extra things and beef up this a little bit, and eventually the levee will break. You're gonna get your opportunity, and they got the same thing. They got offered multiple jobs, and so they can't be happier, right? That they finally cracked it, but it takes that dedication to get it, right? And it's hard. It's hard to. Maybe I was like that. I don't know, but different generation that
Same.
they want something right this second, and it's not happening. And it's like, yeah, you've got to persevere. You really got to dig in here, right?
Yeah.
So
Keep spending the money, keep spending the time, and then when you finally get on, it'll be like you would have spent twice that.
sure, yeah. You look back at the education end of it, getting your eyes done, the amount of stuff that places that you applied for, but it's all worth it. It's all there. You're on the real deal, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then the real work begins.
And the real work begins.
So how long was that period of time then from deciding to try full time and getting on? How long was that?
It wasn't crazy, but I was going hard at it, so it was like 2.5 years as a volunteer, and then but
2 to 5 years seems to be the range, right?
and it depended on how much you wanted to engage and how. I took advantage of every upper hand I had, and my dad was in my ear about that and said, if you're a volunteer, you can go to the fire college, and that's going to get you a leg up on this course, that course, and the other. And I was like, okay. And there wasn't a lot of a lineup for our guys to go, so they were more than willing to send me, and so that really, really helped. But again, you got to take some of the advice and take advantage of the things that are in front of you. And I've said that same thing to a couple guys that are now on, but they got on as volunteers, and I said, okay, now that you're there, you've got a whole arsenal of other things that you can get that people can't. So,
And it seems similarly with me, like with my dad in the service, it was really important for me to, and I think important for him too, that I got this under my own steam.
definitely, yeah. That I've said that, and outside of fire life, the fruits are pretty sweet if you put in the effort to get it, right? So if you reap those fruits, and how much more reward can you have, right? So yeah, it definitely, and you've got to make it, right? Then that shows that you really wanted it, that you're really going for it, and you're serious about it. You just didn't get handed the job. So, and I never wanted that to be the case. I never wanted to look like that you were just, oh well, yeah, your dad was a fire chief, so you got hired.
And your brother's here, so this is why this happened.
Yeah, and I mean, those all help. Don't get me wrong; they help at the interview, and there's nothing wrong with the family on the fire service. I think it's great.
It's a tradition. It's a history.
Sure, yeah, it's all amazing thing. And you get extra. I don't know now, but back a few years back, you get extra points in different cities for having, in the States, a brother on the department or a family member on the department. So, I think it's all a positive, and you understand the culture.
But I'm sure for you, as it was for me too, equally, it's a double-edged sword. So equally as it can be beneficial, you also have a reputation to uphold and live up to.
You do.
So when you come in anonymously and you're the first one in your family, there's really nothing that you have to meet or exceed.
You're right.
But if you have people in the service that have shown up, and you have to as well.
Kind of open the door for you, and it's like, okay, well, now you gotta be switched on too. So. And as a people pleaser, I didn't want to disappoint either.
Same.
So, right. You're not coming in there to mail it in. You're wanting to be the best that you can. So, I think that just speaks for itself. So, yeah, it's all positive.
And people that know that you have family in the service too, that are on the job with you, there's that part in the back of your mind that don't expect you're going to get different treatment because you've got people in the department with you that are in your family, or you have to cut your own cut your own way.
Yeah, you do. And it's weird, even though we are on the same department. It's not like I had crossed paths with my brother a ton over the years. So you do realize that it is a big department. It's a big world. There's lots of calls, and you are going to find your own way. But it's nice to know that my brother didn't do anybody wrong along the ways either. So it was pretty quick for people to warm up to me as well, right? So
Right. But it must have been a bit of a icing on the cake to get on the same department.
definitely, yeah, it was pretty rewarding to all of that. And I was just telling you before we got going here, the badge, the logo, the fire demon. My dad had it in a bunch of other patchwork that he would collect over the years, because you go all over Southern Ontario training, and there's enough firefighters around that said, "Oh, I know who your dad is. He trained us." So that patch, the logo that we had, I remember drawing it with my friend, and we were drawing goalie masks. I was like, "Oh, wouldn't this be cool on your?" So I got on. A, my brother's there. B, I've got this amazing logo to put on my helmet, and it's a pretty progressive upcoming department kind of thing, right? So all big rewards.
And it has even more meaning now that it's the department that you work for.
For sure.
Not just borrowing the design of the demon.
No.
Because you had a family connection. It's even more personal.
Yeah, and it was always that. If I'm going to do anything in terms of a piece of equipment, it was always the notoriety of having a hockey goalie helmet professionally airbrushed. And it was like, yeah, I'm here. I'm actually making some money, and I'm going to do this, because otherwise it's all full of puck marks, right? So,
Because that's how you save most of the goals.
right.
But how amazing that logo stood out amongst a sea of patches.
Sure.
You were somehow gravitated towards that one.
Yeah, and it was all of those synergies. And I believe, good, bad, or indifferent, that there are different synergies out there. And I've seen that in my own personal life, that things link back. They're there, and you can recall those. So it's pretty neat.
You were a bit of a dark cloud when you first got on.
Yeah, I think so. I would say so. There's a fair number of fires, VSAs, car accidents, and lots of stuff going on. And you really reflect back and go, man, this is every day. Like this is a lot. DCs at the time saw that was happening, and another fellow in my recruit class wasn't getting the same call volume, so we did a switch out. But it was a really good first little bit. It didn't matter what I did, even at our own station, I was getting calls, and then I did a couple shift changes right away, and I'd go there and get hammered with fires as well, and they're like, holy thanks for coming, but don't come back, kind of thing, right?
And before you switched out, you had a bit of a funny call with Marty.
I did. Yes. He's the senior guy on the job, and he was just moved in for that shift, but I was new and young and wanted to know everything about everything. So it was, a call at 1 a.m. I was on the other truck, and he went and came back, and I was like, what's the call? And we're whispering to each other. He said, it's just a medical. Go back to bed. Like, turn your brain off. Like, enough, right? Kind of thing. So pretty funny. And then I ended up working a fair chunk with him and learning a lot about the job with him as well. So I always respected, same thing as volunteer, I always respected the older members that have been there for a while, because you could really gravitate, and they could show you the littlest things that make your life that much easier. And even when I got moved out of that station to switch with the other recruit in my class, that was a way older crew than me, but I just kind of melded in, did my thing, learned, and just listened to every little thing that they said. So
And you were saying there was a 16-year gap between you and the youngest guy on that crew.
yeah, and he was my rookie. So they were even older than that. So that's the funny part about it. He was my rookie at 16 years difference, kind of thing. So, but it's all good, and I learned so much from those other senior guys as well. And you just took that with you, and know that you can pass that on to so many people around you.
We've talked about this a little bit, about the change in the face of our department. When we got on, there was a few rookies, but most of the department was senior.
Yeah.
So you stood out. And over the past 5 to 10 years, the face has changed, where it's almost like the majority is under 8 years.
Yeah, for sure. That's good and bad too. If, it doesn't matter who's with you, if you're surrounded by great people, they're senior or rookie, and they're engaged, you're good to go. In my eyes, I'll take anybody that's ready to do the job. So sometimes the senior member may not be as engaged, but in saying that, you've got to be aware of what the experience level is like and really make sure that you're dialed in yourself, because there's moments when you're thinking back and going, man, where did all the time go? Where did 16 and a half years ago? Because I still feel like I'm, fresh, right? You still love the job. You're still engaged and energized. And meanwhile, everybody's looking up to you. It is a big shift, but that's what the evolution of it all is with a growing department for sure. Yeah.
So you couldn't get on to the same department that your dad worked at?
Correct. And we had a little bit of the same thing in the city that I work in now, but it was more a shift lineup that we couldn't be on the same shift. So that was
You and your brother.
Yeah.
Right.
But one summer night I was doing a shift change, and the DC said, well, why don't you go there? And my brother was acting at the time, and I said, well, are you sure? I double checked with him. He said, yeah, go there. And so I embraced it. It wasn't like there was any ill will or anything like that. I thought it was pretty neat. So we did get to do that. And then further to that, when I wrote the promotional exam, he got promoted to our shift, and I was an actor on there. So I would see him at calls, not all the time, but regularly. And we'd run 1-2 on a house fire kind of thing. So pretty neat. And it wasn't anything super crazy that we ran.
A unique experience.
Yeah, for sure. It was kind of nice to see him there, and you could see what was going on, and kind of catch up and see you at Christmas.
Yeah, it's something that shouldn't be squashed. I mean, I remember when there's a family of like an uncle and 3 brothers, right? And they made a point before, the uncle retired, that they actually managed to get 2 of the brothers and the uncle in the same truck.
Yeah,
to run some calls, right? It's a pretty special thing, and I understand a few of the angles of why they would not want that to happen, but
heaven forbid if the worst tragedies, of anybody's career that would happen to,
a full family,
that full truck, whatever it is. But I definitely, I'll look back on that and remember it, and it was pretty neat. So,
have you always been drawn to teams, team building?
Yeah,
teamwork.
I would say so. Yeah, just with playing sports and growing up in that environment and very competitive in sports, playing high level ball, baseball, and then same with hockey, you really realize how much you have to rely on other people. As much as the positions I played were kind of individual in a way, as a goaltender, as a pitcher, you have a lot of control, but you also have to have the faith in everybody else that's there. So I love that dynamic, and I think it's super important with our job. Nothing more glaring has appeared in front of my face that I think when the team, whether it's a sports team or your work team, is galvanized, and it doesn't always happen. It's not everybody's going to mesh, but if everybody's kind of playing to the same song sheet, usually things are going to run smoother. And it doesn't matter if it's a call, the day-to-day, the training. If everybody's on the same page, we're going to be good, and we can get through whatever it is, because the job throws all sorts of hiccups at you. It doesn't necessarily have to be a call. So we've seen that in many regards, right?
So no perfect group of people is going to experience no chaos.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Yes. Yeah.
So galvanize, like you said, the pieces that you can, and then you can focus on the chaos that's going to come.
Yeah, and you're going to deal with it better because there's not the inner dialogue that isn't working. If everybody's unique and on their own and not getting along, well, when you have those issues, it's going to magnify itself. When everybody's okay and working together, you're totally checked in, you're engaged, everybody knows what's going on. You don't have to live each other's lives by any means. And I don't know that we do that necessarily now because everybody's so busy, different dynamics and that. But when you're hanging out a little bit off the jaw. If you can pull that off, that's a big thing. But definitely, I've seen it before where, you're not even doing meals together, and it's not the ideal dynamic for sure.
When did you decide to get involved in instructing?
I guess I kind of looked at live fire in year 11, 12, and kind of went in unsure if I wanted to do that, and unsure of my own skills, even though I had been at the busiest hall in the city for 10 years. I had seen a number of calls and fires, etc. You still had that little bit of doubt in the back of your head. And I guess your reputation, how you're going to be received. So knowing that, it's how you approach it too, because I've seen very good instructors and some that were okay, or were sometimes argumentative with people and critical. And I thought, I really don't want to do that. I just want to impart some knowledge on crews and have a good day and train together and bring that all kind of back. So,
And you had coaching and training experience outside the job.
I did.
So it wasn't like you had never taken on that role. It was just in this new arena.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was something, being an ice hockey coach or a goaltender coach, I had years of doing it. I had years on the job as well, but it's a different dynamic. You're in your own head thinking, I don't know if I can give enough wisdom here, kind of thing. So, but yeah, you are right. I did have that there, and having done it and looked at the teaching end of it, I really did enjoy it. So,
And on the ice, was it adult learning?
the team I coached, we were only 4 or 5 years apart, almost adult.
Peers.
They were older for sure. And then goaltenders, it kind of ranged from young to old, right? But you went on your experience, and they had you there for a reason.
How would you compare the receptiveness and the resistance balance between coaching in a sport and coaching and instructing in the fire service?
That's a great question. Probably similar. That for the most part, I think it all depends on your delivery, because you would know yourself, and I know myself. You can check somebody out in 2 seconds, and you see it in pro sports where they're not listening to the coach, they're done with you, and the next thing you know, his job's on the line. So much like a teacher, I had great teachers, some not so great along the way, and it depends on their delivery model. So you learn that, and you learn what doesn't work, and you learn that typically browbeating and pounding down on people, they're not going to respond to that. You got to let them think things through. And I'll do that still now, even trying to teach or coach even little kids. I know it's different, but I'll ask them, what do you think? Like, give me your feedback on it. And then they've thought the process through, and they're giving you the answer that you're going to get to anyway. But now that they can process it and make something of it. So.
And now in this generation and the technology we have available to us, we can't snow anybody even if you wanted to. I can fact check what you're telling me moments after you say it.
Yes. Yeah.
So you have to really know your stuff.
You do, and you're not going to know everything either.
Right.
And it speaks a lot to being humble as well. Your integrity is the main core of what you're going to do, and that respect is created from that, but also being humble and saying, you know what, I don't know. I'll get you the answer to that. And you can walk away and find the answer, and they'll respect that as well. But if you come across like you know everything, it's not going to last very long.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest compliments you can get is for guys to say, well, it's this guy doing the teaching, so it's going to be good.
Right. Yeah.
So they already come in with that mentality, and then you're just building on that momentum.
Yeah. Yeah, you know you're going to have a great day then.
Right.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to build it up because a lot of people have had a lot of horrible experiences.
Yes.
So they assume that it's just going to be more of the same.
You're very right on that one as well.
But I think it's easy to be refreshing for people.
True.
Like you said, in the first few minutes, they can tell this is not like what I've experienced before. And you can see they're a bit taken aback by it and then pleased with it.
Yeah. Let's open this up. Have a great day. We're going to engage. And then everybody gets something out of that for sure.
Did it impact you to see the gap between what we think we're capable of and the reality of where our skills are?
Yeah, for sure. And as much as you run a ton of calls and you think you got it all figured out, and then you see where, your training is or what you need work on. I think the biggest eye opener there would have been when I went from the crew I was with for 10 years into a whole nother shift, a whole nother station. And you go, oh my goodness, now we're here. And I thought everything was good, or I thought the whole department was on the same page, and you go out and act and you're like, oof, we need to work on a couple things here, and including yourself. So yeah, it doesn't speak any more volume of us needing to train when you get out of your own little shell and go have a look at what everybody else is doing. So
Yeah, so juxtapose for me how much guys in the job may practice their sports and how much they practice their job. Do you notice a difference teaching in both areas?
Yeah, potentially. But again, if that same desire is there to be a great athlete or to get on the fire service, you need to keep carrying that through, right? As a recruit, you would jump over a mountain to get the job. So keep that going and keep yourself engaged. And our senior members could look at that too. Like, don't lose the flame if you can. Keep yourself involved with it. And because the job has changed so much, yeah, we still run calls, etc. But there's lots of different nuances with it, the different protocols that we have. So it's forever changing, and you have to acknowledge and engage that.
But guys, I think in general, shoot a lot more pucks and practice the basics on the ice than they do practicing the basics with their job.
Potentially, yeah. And yeah, that there's no clear time that back to the basics is key all the time, right? Just do the main things over and over again, and then it won't be a surprise when you're going anywhere. You've got it down. Yeah.
I'm interested to know if you had the same experience with, say, classifications. Been a lot of talk over the years about, because there's so many classifications to be done because of NFPA limitations, that we can't always do live burns for people going through their classifications. So it's usually smoking out a building and using red flashing lights. And one of the common things that I would hear or be told is that people would dismiss it and saying, well, we don't even do live fire for our classifications, so it doesn't mean anything yet. And as important as the end use of your skills is with live burns. So with sports, you start with the basics. You don't get people playing full games when they're first learning how to skate.
Right.
You have to build people up. And I'm sure you could quickly tell whether someone's in a real game or not, if they're just skating around cones, whether they're a good player or they're not.
True.
So I tried to frame it for people sometimes that if the smoked out building and the red flashing lights is so easy, why isn't everyone crushing it and getting 100%?
True.
Why are people crap in the bed
Right.
with smoke and flashing lights? If you can't thrive and bring your A game with smoke and flashing lights and no stress and no pressure, then how are you in any chance in hell going to thrive under a real call?
Yeah. And I don't think for anything that, the real deal, we don't even get enough of that, the real firefighting end of it, right? The real fire training. So to take that away or think to do it any way differently, I wouldn't agree with that. Like it was all you could give for those first 3 years of classifications, and that's what you focused on. And that was a big, big day, and it was a full day, and it was full paces, full everything, full skills, and you were proving yourself. If you came back with a subpar mark or you didn't pass something, it was a huge reflection on your crew. It was a huge reflection on your effort. And those things, again, talking about team, and I guess that's some of the officers I came with, like those were the big deals. And it was a big deal if you didn't do well on that. So you prepared and brought everything you took to practice to the game. So for us to downplay that in any way, I think it would be detrimental for sure.
Yeah, because how can you run if you haven't walked first?
Yeah, there's a good analogy.
So see it as a progression, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then really focus on dialing it all into the full deal, which is where we're at with live fire now. We spent the past 5 years with a long play game, building up the basics.
Yeah.
With the culmination this year of full-blown scenarios, letting crews just run it, amalgamate all the things they've learned,
Yeah.
seeing how much of it that they've practiced over the years
Right.
and kept tuned in, and what they need to get back and focus on. I think people now going through that experience really appreciate it, with nothing on the docket of we're teaching you this specific technique this year.
Right.
You have to run the scenario this way. So it's now become as close as possible to the real deal.
The real McCoy. Yeah.
And the accountability is on them, because everything has been offered to them in pieces and built up level for level.
Right.
You did driving instruction as well.
I did. It was a good time. Same thing as live fire. There wasn't a ton of people putting up their hand, and I was already instructing and sitting in the right seat. So I thought I wasn't full-time as an officer, but I could act and go station to station if someone needed it and sign people off accordingly. I didn't have credentials or background per se, but I thought I was an all right apparatus operator, and I was the one that put my hand up. Yeah, some really good calls and moments and people that can handle an apparatus, and some where it was like, whew. But you have that, with senior guys as well. It doesn't matter. I did enjoy that, and I did see a good similarity there, that it's not a bad thing if an acting officer had that skill or sign off or potential to, because you're there anyways. You're sitting right beside them and you're navigating for them. So you're going to do that in your job anyhow. I know it couldn't be tailored as such for our driving instructors, but I saw it as that, and I took every opportunity to treat it as such. So I wasn't afraid to put somebody up there, even if they wanted to learn, drive back from a call, whatever it was. I was totally open for it, and I hope anybody that had sat with me or sits with me now sees that I'm relatively calm in the front seat and don't scream and holler, because I've had that as a driver and it doesn't go well.
No, it doesn't.
No, if you're not a good driver and someone's screaming at you, it gets worse.
Yeah. Even if you're a good driver and someone's screaming at you, it's harder to keep being a good driver.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the driving instruction is a good example of how we don't necessarily prepare our people to be instructors. I'm sure you would have benefited from going and taking a legitimate fire apparatus driving defensive course.
Definitely.
And then being mentored on how to teach that skill. Graduating level for level, like we just talked about, into that role.
Absolutely. And as an officer, you see how much you rely. And I remember other actors saying the same thing to me, because I thought it was okay. I knew our area. I knew where I had to go and could handle the truck just fine. And they were comforted by having a decent driver with them. So on the other end of it, if you're the instructor and you have someone new, you know that they know the basics. And what do they know? Should they have gone through a course? Should there be a defensive driving? Are you going to get into an accident? Et cetera, et cetera. So I could see the need, and I think other departments take this a little differently in terms of our approach, that they second their driver after a certain classification for a couple weeks, one of pumping, one of defensive driving, and then they put them back in the rotation for 3 months of just driving. So that kind of makes sense to me, that they've learned the job for the first few years of their classifications. Now they're ready to take on the role of an apparatus operator, and it all moves on from there. And then myself as an instructor, if they give me any of those sorts of things, or I'm involved in any of that capacity, at least I'm up to speed too, and can impart everything that was given to me as well. Not just, hey, you're a good driver, why don't you sign some people off?
Right. It should almost be seen from the worst case scenario of an inquest.
Oh,
and played backwards.
for sure.
And then it can be a bit maddening. We've discussed this before about what the focus and priorities are of a department, where, you have to do WMIS every single year, and you have to check this box and have this course under your belt corporately.
Yeah.
Yet, when it all came down to it, if they pulled your training records, you were never certified as a driving instructor. You just put your hand up because you decided to throw yourself into it and do the best you could. And yet, in the accident, you would probably be held responsible and have to speak to why, the person that you taught didn't know what you taught them. So it cascades all the way back to, if you really want to button things up and have everything dotted and crossed, it should start with properly preparing your people.
In so many regards. And I remember having, even as an actor, my dad said to me, you better get a rein on it if you're going to station and they're not towing the line. And driving was one of them. There's been instances where they got into real trouble and the guy was driving like that all day and nobody said a word. So if I can give any advice to an actor, go in there and treat it real deal. And if the guy, girl, whoever is driving erratically, then get a rein on it and switch your drivers out or whatever it is, because they're in control of 4 lives in there and whoever else are going in to oncoming traffic, whatever it is. So you really got to treat it seriously. I do believe that for sure.
And look the other way too, with the big picture of requesting from the administration that they properly train you before you start doing this work.
Yeah. Yep.
Otherwise, they're not going to have any driving instructors.
Right.
Right. I mean, this accountability should go both ways.
Definitely. Yeah. And then now you know that everybody's up to speed. They've got all the checks in place and they're where they need to be. Yeah.
If we're going to be official about things, let's be official about it. Not just pick and choose what we want to be official about, right? And disregard the other things.
Touché.
So currently you're also an R2MR instructor. So that's the Road to Mental Readiness. It's a mental health education program. I would highly recommend that people look into it for their departments.
Yeah.
It's been beneficial for us as part of what we do as peer support, but you got drawn into peer support as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
So how did that happen?
Thanks to you. Yeah, you and I were having a conversation. You probably didn't even know you were doing it. So yeah, I was just kind of vicariously unloading on you the back of Station 12, and I've had it happen numerous times now that I'm on the team. I wasn't on the team at the time, and then that kind of piqued my interest. You handle things like you normally do really well, and so I was like, that could be okay. And I wasn't sure, add another thing to the list that you want to get involved in, right? So I wasn't sure what my efforts could be. And now that I'm into it, and the training's more, and then now you're an R2MR instructor, and I've seen that pay off manyfold there. That training and our team, and I've had to use it in my own experiences, which is good and bad, right? So,
on and off the job.
Yeah, on and off the job. Such a bonus and a good tool to have for me, and I'm proud to be a part of that team for sure. So
you also mentioned you had a terrible call as a volunteer, and
yeah,
that sort of resonated with you to get involved in this as well.
And that was kind of what I was vicariously unloading on you that day. I was back at the station, new on as a volunteer, to the point where I just got my pager or whatever have you, and my mom had left our house and was driving the same direction as this call was. So the call came in like 7 minutes after she left for an accident. I was like, holy cow, this is the real deal. It could be my mom. It wasn't, but it was a brutal accident nonetheless. A lawn maintenance truck turned in front of another vehicle. The other vehicle had 3 people in it, a mother and 2 young kids. We got there was carnage everywhere. I drove my own vehicle because it was closer to there than the hall. I always thought I could make the truck, but it was the furthest away, so it was never, it wasn't going to happen. But I went there to render help, and there was another volunteer that was close too, so we were both dealing with the call and dealing with the little girl. Air ambulance had to come, the whole bit. And I remember our district chief at the time, the dust had all settled, and we were packing up, and I was like, holy wow, that was a big deal. And he said, is everybody all right? And he was old school. He said, everybody okay here? Like that was a big call. That was overwhelming, and he had seen tons. And he said, if you guys want to talk about anything, and I was like, gosh, I think I'm okay. But the call stuck with me, and it's still, I can still play it back. I'm fine with it, but thinking back and knowing what I know now, that would have been, more than just a roadside debriefing or post incident. So I saw that in my scope, and that's part of your makeup too, all the calls and the things you see. So it helps when you're talking to your own members or dealing with things, and you can see the benefit of having that peer team there, because you've got other people to rely on, and you can just talk about the call and make sure that everybody's okay. And the process that we have and checking in with people, and I think it's fantastic.
Right. So there's a couple things to address there. I think your drive to that call, right, and what you were dealing with. So even though the reality of getting there and realizing it wasn't your family member, it wasn't your mom, you still experienced that stress and that worry, those thoughts during the drive there.
Oh.
So even though the reality of what it turned out to be was not that, you can't dismiss that experience.
It was brutal. So you're way up and then a little leveled off, and then you roll into
An actual
mess.
So
A
yeah,
mess.
it didn't dial right down to, oh, it's just a fender bender.
No.
So you experience that, you get there with the relief, and then you're immediately back into a hot call.
Yeah. Way big call.
That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, at 22.
I think it also speaks to how great it was that there even was a mention from your captain to, hey, does anybody want to talk about that, and the acknowledgement that it was bad.
That was huge. Yeah, and
that many years back.
Yeah, a long time ago for sure. We're talking 16 and a half, 17 years ago, right? So it was a big deal. Yeah.
So there was something there.
Yep.
So how's the experience been for you being a peer support member? How's it opened your eyes? What has it taught you? Do you find it equally fulfilling and draining?
Yeah, there's moments when it's tiresome, but it's just tiresome based on where you're at in your life and your day to day. Can you take on more? Can you do the check-in calls? Can you do the things that you need to do to really give your 100% to people? Because you do vicariously get it too from other experiences. And maybe I've got too much on my plate as it is doing WSIB, etc. as well, but you're dealing with members on a regular basis. So I have felt so many rewards out of it too, where we've done a check-in call, everything's been okay, and you ended up just chewing the fat with whoever, and you catch up with them on the phone, and things are good, and you move on. So you do feel that reward out of it. But yeah, you know that you're there for the membership, and you're doing a solid service for them. It has opened my eyes that even through my own experiences, that it is needed, and the work will not stop, because the calls are happening every single day, and you see the list of check-in calls all the time. It's a busy city, it's busy calls, it's busy everything. It's 473 plus members to deal with.
So just to clarify for people too, so there was always this, what I believe to be a gap between expecting people to phone us that they were having troubles and reach out to us, sort of horse whispering them, and making a formal debrief, which is what they call it, or diffusing, or we call it post-incident discussion now, because you diffuse bombs and it just seems off. It's really just a talk, right? And I think people are really surprised after we do a talk of how genuinely human it is. But there was this gap between making things automatic and waiting for them to come to us, and then thinking about how you don't even process what you've been through for at least 24 to 72 hours, that fact. So the way we bridged that gap was to one-on-one phone people off duty and just in general say, I realize you had a rough call last shift. Just want to check in with you and see how you're doing. It's that simple. And for the most part, it's, yeah, I'm doing great. And even if they're not, if they're lying to you, then at least they know you cared and you called. And there's been a few instances I think for each of us where there has been something.
Yes.
It opens up into a discussion. So if we would ever try and do a check-in while they're still on shift, or even a couple of shifts later, call the station, people aren't likely to want to talk about it. And it's probably not the best opportunity to talk to people while they're catching a cold call while they're at the station and on the station phone. So when you're off duty and you get it on your personal cell, right, you've got a little bit more freedom to be yourself and be stepped away from it. So you're more likely to open up.
Yeah, and they, depending on the dynamic of the crew as well, they may be reserved, that they don't want to speak with others around, or there's lots of places in a station to go to have those calls. But I find the value is, yeah, you're at home, you're relaxed making the call, and they are too. They're not on edge, and the tones go off to another incident, and you're just doing that. You're doing a check-in call, and most of the time it is a great catch up. But that lays that framework, skating around the pylons, to doing it on a regular basis, right? You can show them through the process. Now they understand the process, and they're more apt to reuse the process. It's there. They know it's not a critique. It's not anything more than a conversation. And you can extend other services that are needed to them. And it's paying off dividends, I think. Personally, I do.
Yeah, so even though it's post-incident for these check-in calls, it's also preventative because they're learning that exists. The connections are being built. The peer support members that are newer, that maybe wouldn't be comfortable running a post-incident discussion with a group, get their feet wet in a way of just reaching out and realizing it's just genuine human connection and looking out for each other. So for people that may want to detract from it, and there would be some reasons why people would think, well, why would you want to phone and remind someone of a bad call that they had? But for the overwhelmingly amount of positivity we've received from it, and I think what it's contributed to the shift of the department, no part of me would think that we need to stop doing it.
Well, and it's so much different than, you're bringing up those calls again, but I have non-fire friends off the job, and they're sitting there waiting for you to unload and tell them about, have you done this? Have you done that? And those aren't the venues. I don't want to dig up all the calls that I've gone through for your entertainment.
It's a different approach.
Way different. And for us, we're dealing with it. We're processing it. And we're having genuine conversations to make sure we're okay. I'm not telling you the funny graphic story about whatever we did,
And we're not asking for details.
We're not asking.
I literally just want to acknowledge you had a rough call. How are you doing? Can I do anything for you? Here's what's available.
Yeah.
You don't even need to touch it if you don't want.
Yeah.
But you can if you want to.
Yeah.
So it's in your court on your terms, as opposed to being at the dinner party where, what's the worst call you've ever been to?
They've handed
Thanks
you
for
the
that.
microphone. Yeah. Vicariously, we want to know what you've done and how bad it was, and we're going to make.
Because in reality, it may have happened 2 shifts ago.
It was a couple shifts ago.
Right? Where the most recent one was. It's not always, they think maybe they're asking you that you did something 10 years ago.
Oh, I was biting my tongue. It was not long ago. I was biting my tongue. And
You had this exact experience.
brutal call. And I'm like, I'm not even going to entertain it. And I just let it go. I didn't get into it.
Deflect and
Yeah.
Right.
Just change the subject. But you truly know you're dealing with it, or could be dealing with it at that moment.
Speaking of MVCs, so you worked on a squad for 11 out of the 16 years?
Yeah, privilege of headquarters and another 2 stations that both had squads there. Great experience. Love that end of it. Yeah, I do miss that part of it. I really enjoyed having a squad. But
And you were lucky to have one of our best captains over the years mentor you.
Yeah, I think he was the department the department instructor for extrication. So like everything else, it kind of went under his wing. Got involved in the extrication team on an outside basis. Wasn't one of the main core guys, but I got involved in a few events, went with him. And
did you have some trepidation of getting involved in some sort of team and competition at that level of years on, and you were encouraged to do it?
Yeah,
anyways?
he said, I'm doing it anyway, so just come out. And so I was like, okay.
Opportunity knocks.
Yeah, you just look at it, and that's why wouldn't I, right? You get more chances to cut cars apart. I'm hanging out with him. He's a wealth of knowledge, and then you get to go to these other events and see more there. So yeah, I didn't have a long affiliation with the team per se, but I got a ton out of it. I always knew that he was involved with training everybody department wide. So every opportunity we got to build on our skills and go with them and learn more and practice, that was kind of what you did, right? So
he influenced you as a firefighter, as a instructor.
Yep.
And would you say as a captain now that you've taken some things from him?
For sure. There's, and him and I have had those conversations, and he'd say, you may not like everything I do, but if you can take a couple things away, or take a couple things away from every person that you've worked with, and that's how you're going to be. And I try and live that way too. So I've seen how he'd approach things and the conversations about difficult work-related stuff, etc. So I do I respect him a ton, and it was a big deal. And I'm glad that I had the chance to work with him for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
He was a pretty matter-of-fact guy. I'm going to call things like he saw it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. There, he
Not being afraid to.
Shoots from the hip.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
So you and your brother are both captains now.
Yeah.
Were you given any advice or support from your dad and your brother to make the leap? Was it a decision all on your own? How did that go?
With the captain I was just speaking about, I knew I wanted to get into the role. There wasn't any waffling. I knew that I was going to challenge the exam, etc. And Mike was doing the same. So seeing that and going that avenue, I knew it was going to be a part of it. And my captain didn't go any higher than that role as well. And I respected that too. I saw his pros and cons about moving up and, his involvement and working with the team and the training and all those things. So I genuinely like that.
He found his niche and his love and just went with it.
Yeah. So there's something to be said about that for sure. Advice wise, go back to what my dad had said. It was your integrity and who you are, and be true to yourself, because guys will test you, and you could see it as an actor. Guys would, pull little things off, and you just call a spade and run the station the way it should be run, and do the training and do the day-to-day like the officer would.
Not just substitute teacher.
That was pretty much the word, right? You're not the substitute teacher. You're there to do the job. And
you don't get substitute calls that day.
Right. So treat it, as the real deal. So if any advice I could give to any new actor or anybody thinking of the role, that was something that stuck with me for sure. I don't know, maybe people that have crossed my path didn't like my approach, or they do, or whatever have you, but I was just as true and honest as I could be, and try and run the best day and the best shift that you could. We're not just mailing it in here. Those all resonated with me, and you try and carry that forward, doing the same thing. So
getting back to not necessarily preparing our people the proper way in the absence of an officer development program and truly leveling people up skill by skill and mentoring and easing them into the role.
Right.
It's very much literally thrown into the fire and learning as you go. So what were you doing? Obviously, your captain was preparing you long before you challenged the exam.
Yeah.
Were you doing anything else? Were there books you were reading? Were there any videos that you were watching? Like, how are you preparing yourself in the absence of the preparation that you should have been offered by your department?
Yeah, so I guess and a couple people I'd ask along the way, what did you do now that you're this, that, or the other, captain, chief, or whatnot? And so there was lots of discussion about books on leadership, that sort of thing. So I would prepare myself there, and I kind of gravitate to those books anyways. I like to know someone's past, someone's journey, as well as doing mentoring. You think you've got it all figured out. You've run, lots of calls, busy station, and I had a truckload of calls after the exam was done, the first writing. So the exam was done in, say, May, and I knew I was leaving in September. I knew I was going to another shift, and we just had call after call. So the dark cloud came back. And then the first day I go to act in the new year, and I'm at the TR hall with one truck. So I've got 3 personnel there, and we've got probably one of the bigger responsibilities on the job.
5 extra disciplines.
Sure.
Low volume.
Yeah.
High danger.
High danger.
Just to frame this for people then, so there's a pumper or an engine there with 4, and then there's an aerial or a ladder with at least 3, sometimes 4. And then when a tech rescue call comes in, the pumper crew drops back to the TR truck, and the aerial crew would come. So you would be going with 7 minimum, maybe 8 people. On a really great day, you'd have more. And on a really, really great day, they would all be TR trained. But
touche again.
That is because we're a department where everybody has to be treated equally, in the sense of everybody moves.
Right.
Shift changers, however, the roster of that station just needs to get filled. I mean, I'm not saying that the people that build rosters don't do their best to stack that, and it's gotten better, I think, ish over the years. But what you're describing is basically, improperly staffed in that moment in that day.
Oh,
and go time.
Big, huge eye opener.
With no full-on experience for you. AutoX for days,
Sure.
but now you're dealing with ropes and strong backs. It's a different animal.
It's a good day to not be at work.
Right. So how overwhelming?
Well, yeah, it came down to the point where, right away I'm asking what vehicles we're planning on bringing.
How do you guys do this?
And
Right.
and I didn't really get a strong answer. And I said, you know what, maybe we'll just bring them all. We'll deal with it, because they've got to bring players from everywhere. We only had 4 people. So if it's going to be an extensive call, I've got to draw on.
Which those calls are?
Yeah.
They're all extensive.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's bring all the equipment there, and they'll get me the people that are going to be able to handle the equipment. But that was a huge eye opener. So further to that, I mean, you still mentor, etc. But I decided myself that if anything I was going to do, I was going to start going through the company officer program at the fire college. So I did that. I did the 1021 1 through 4, and 3 and 4 for sure they're administrative, but I wanted to see something through all the way through. That's just the nature of who I am. But company officer 1 and 2 were a great stepping stone, and it's an NFPA program. So you've got people from all over Ontario that are attending this, all different skill levels and experience, but you're going through some of the logistics of it, of making an SOG or policy, etc. But the incident command part of it was good and beneficial. So I looked at that as something that I thought was important, and it helped to give me a little more framework and a little more confidence. And then the more you get out there, you don't have a choice anyways. You're going to start to figure out your routine and ease into it a little bit better. But could we use a little bit more and do a little bit more to groom our officers? That's been discussed since the first day I hit the floor. So yeah, for sure, you need to train and develop your people. It doesn't matter at what level. If you're running a max milk, you got to train and develop the guy that's going to run the store, kind of thing.
Succession planning.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
And the people to have this fantasy that, well, I'm going to act and the job's going to ease me into it. The calls will come when I'm ready. The crew will be great and solid until I settle into my role. That isn't the way it plays out.
Not at all.
And if it does anecdotally once in a while, well, that's great for them. But you were thrown into a role where when you finally were made up at our hall, so it was initially a 1-truck hall, you were brought in, a brand new truck. And it's been you not mentoring under a full-time captain. It's you and as a full-time captain, first time, with an actor under you every day.
Yep.
And a bunch of new players and everyone trying to figure each other out. And I think we've been really blessed to have the people we do.
Yep.
It's worked out really well, but it was a dice roll. Like there's a lot of dice rolls, right?
Well, I'll reverse back to the first time that I did right and switch shifts. So I left people I was with for 10 years, new shift, new station. Some of the players I knew, 2 of the players I knew, a couple I didn't know so well. One of them, within the second shift that I was there, passed away. So if you think that the job won't find you, that life's going to be rosy and gravy, and you're going to go act somewhere else and everything's going to be just fine, you sometimes get dealt a real crap storm. So having said all of that and survived all of that and then built myself back up again, I figured that good, bad, or indifferent, we would be able to weather enough of a storm. Bringing in new players, I had that experience with a single truck haul when I went down to the place I was at for 10 years. We were a single truck haul and had that second crew come in. So I knew that as a firefighter, not as an officer. So I could draw on that experience as well. So I was very fortunate that, again, all these little synergies come back. And then we had a bit of a list of people to draw from. And the players that I saw coming to me, I could see that it was going to be fine. It was just a matter of everybody getting to know each other. I thought, this is a strong group. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or says or how much you guys know each other. I was happy with everybody that we were getting. So.
And you just have a part in that and helping it grow. It's also incumbent on all of us,
yes,
as grown adults and as professionals and as genuine people, to sort of figure out our own level.
That's totally true as well. It doesn't all fall on my shoulders for you guys to all get along, but in the human dynamics of it didn't look like it was going to be a wild ride, right? We were all going to feel each other out and figure it all out. And I think now going through what we've gone through as a crew and developing and, the second truck in place and the ups and downs and the good calls and et cetera, I think we're all thankful that we're all there, right? So,
Do you think it would have been better for you, and it would be better for people in general, to start acting within their own crew at their station that they've been at for 10 years and then gravitate outwards, as opposed to really when you're acting and you're acting on your own shift initially,
yeah,
but then you get moved. Most likely you've got a 1 in 4 chance of staying on your shift.
yeah,
And then if you're lower on the list, you're not acting at the same station a lot. You could be back when we were on the old shift, you could do in 5 days, you could be at 5 different trucks.
right.
And you're getting on the radio thinking, looking at the door, peeking your head at the door and looking down to see what truck am I even on right now. Right?
Done that once or twice.
Which especially plays out in the middle of the night. So you wake up, walk out and go, oh yeah, I'm at 12 tonight. And you got to use 12 on the radio. So there's a lot of extra stresses, I think, that are thrown on people that don't necessarily need to be there when you're trying to literally just figure out how to IC at a bad call.
Yeah, and I got a brand new driver, and I'm at another station, and right?
Right.
Yeah, I think there's some definite merit to maybe staying within your own station and getting groomed and developed with the people you already know and have those comforts with. You know their strengths anyways. You're not trying to navigate that shift to shift. That's a big thing in itself. You know who can drive, who can't. You kind of have an idea of the area. That alone is such a comfort zone.
And they know you. They know your integrity. They know how you've been leading up to that moment. You can have conversations with them over days and weeks for them to see that you're just trying.
Yep.
You don't have to reconvince another group of people.
That's right. Let's work through this together, run the calls together, just like we've already been doing anyways. You just have somebody else up in the front seat. So I do believe there's some merit to that, to the whatever you want to do, if you want to call it the lieutenant, or an acting lieutenant or whatever it is. And then they jump in, they know the cadence, they know the training that needs to get done. They know the day to day. So there's no surprises there. When you're going out on your own, it's like, ooh, this isn't good.
There's a lot of fingers crossed sometimes.
Yeah. And
for all of us.
It really plays a moment in your head when you're consistently acting. You're going station to station, and you kind of, as you got higher up, you got to pick a little bit more where you wanted to go, but you were going different places all the time, and you're knowing you got to deal with a different truck or a different area or more high rise or whatever. So that's a psychological. It's not like the firefighter that's coming in there and they've been doing that same routine for 5 or 6 years. You're coming into a whole different scope every single time. So that plays physically and mentally a bit of a toll on each individually, right? You're so far out of your comfort zone.
And as much as every firefighter should have their own professionalism and their own accountability and what they're capable of doing, given the setup that we have, it's almost even more important that every individual keeps themselves spot on.
Yes.
Because you can't be assured when you show up at a hall that, you can lean on the team because you don't even know them at that level. So if everybody at least shows up being accountable for themselves, then, like you said, things will galvanize quicker.
And we've put some of the procedures in place to allow the officer a little bit more cadence at a fire. You got your SRDs, etc.
Fighting fires and running calls as a department as opposed to,
right.
C shift station 10 does it this way.
Yes. So it doesn't matter who's in the front calling the calls, calling the quarterback plays. You should be able to get the similar result out of it because you know what. So,
and we're still working towards it.
And we are, definitely. So
it's slowly getting there. And I think just like peer support and culture shift, we're seeing it get there.
Yeah.
We just got to keep championing and the persistence and perseverance, right?
Yeah.
And the patience.
For sure.
Has the logistical end of things surprised you? What your day might be like and what your days are actually like?
Yeah. To say it's frustrating, but you roll with the punches and don't make a big deal of it. But there's so much that you have in your head that you want to get accomplished. But we've got a lot of other things pulling at us. The priority to me is let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to firefighting. It's hard because you're a sunshine list public employee and they want you out there, and that's part of the gig too. I totally understand that, but your day is full from wire to wire. It's sometimes challenging to get other things done, and you deal with it, you do, but I think we could have a real look at ourselves and what we're doing as a service and how we're delivering things, and get that up to speed first, and then the other stuff can fall into place.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rollout of technology with minimal training too. How are you finding that?
Oh, that's awesome, because I'm not I'm not the best techie guy, if you will. I can hack through anything, but all this stuff that's coming our way, back to training, it doesn't matter if it's driver training, if it's hose deployment, whatever it is, roll it out accordingly, and we'll get it. We'll put it into place, train us, and it's good to go. But the minute anything comes out half-ass, it just gets shot down because guys don't have any faith in it. It's like,
Or patience or time.
or patience or time, yeah.
And the drive to, see the city as a whole and every employee as a whole team is nice. It's
Yep.
important on some levels, but just as much as forestry is their own animal, we are our own animal, and not everything that's brought out to a general population and treating everyone the same works.
100%.
We have different needs
We do.
in a different day.
And we need to focus on those because it is so much more different than everywhere else. And I get that. We sat in on that speech yesterday with the city side of things. It was awesome. It was really good, but the people are from all over. And if I got up and gave my story as to what's important on a day-to-day, it's the team unity. And I listened to a whole bunch of other people, and I wasn't even in their scope of thought. And all I wanted to do is bring our team together and function accordingly and train together and work hard together. And I'm not saying it could have just been happenstance with the people that spoke up, but it's such a different look, right? Even though it is the city that everybody's there, it's a whole different way they're operating. So
Just to summarize a little bit before we move on, newer captain, you've got a new team, WSIB, which we're going to touch on. Also Benevolent Committee, we'll talk about that as well. And then we lost a crew member this year.
right.
On top of everything else, a really well-loved
Yep.
icon, I think, friend, colleague on all those levels. You stepping up as a leader early on to our new crew, so you stepping up within the station, and then, you stepped up huge and spoke at the funeral. So while you're grieving and mourning the loss yourself, and you're also a peer supporter,
Yeah.
we talk about having all these responsibilities and expectations on us, and also the responsibilities and expectations we have on ourselves, and then we're in it, and we couldn't be closer to it. And I acknowledged us losing Thu in one of the intros of one of the other podcasts, and I'd like to eventually do one that's solely focused on amalgamating all the stories.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet. This is sort of first delving into discussing it. To even ask how that experience was for you. I mean, I know because we were together,
Yeah.
but it's been a brutal year,
Uh,
to understate it.
yeah, we could reset 2018 would be a good.
It would be a good one.
Yeah.
That was a really bonding experience for us as a crew. I think things shifted
Yeah,
hard
it did. Yeah. And
and are still shifting.
going through that before with the loss of the other crew again was all I could do to draw on everything my former officer did and how he handled it. And I'm thankful for you, for our own group, because even though we were in it, we stuck together the best we could. They definitely don't put that one in the exam book, to speak at the funeral, and that was something I never in my wildest dreams thought I would have to do. I was at another funeral, and it already had happened. But in my own scope, I thought, well, that's probably not going to happen to me. But
It always happens at other departments, other stations, other
Sure.
crews.
Yeah, sure. I've seen it. I've been to so many other funerals with the honor guard, and
Which we'll get to,
and I've heard different people from all scopes, from police, from fire, and so for me to be up there and pay tribute to him, and
And to see each of us on the team, hour to hour, day to day, shift to shift,
yeah,
navigate our way into what this new world looks like.
Yeah.
and have our own moments and try and be there for each other and try to give each other space and still run calls.
Yeah. Yeah. So many tough moments there. Even back to getting the phone call and then having to call all of you guys. Like, again, nothing that I'd ever wish on my worst enemy. But we did it. We got through it. That's the importance, again, of having the team and making sure that everybody's somewhat galvanized or somewhat on the same page. You're going to come together pretty quick there, whether you like it or not.
Do you think a group of people that are thinking of getting into this role would benefit from it, sitting down in a lecture about this, about how this went, how this has gone for you in the past, like filling people in on how complex this will be? And you can't prepare people for everything. You can train them and level them up and then burn some hay in pallets. Then the reality is going to be their experience, and we survive as a team. But I think there's something to be said about speaking this truth about how that experience went, and people could, have a glimpse behind the curtain and get a little closer to being better prepared for if it's ever going to happen to them.
Yeah, and
Because I was overwhelmed. We were all overwhelmed.
we all were, for sure. Whether or not we made the changes as a department or not, that's still work in progress and how things were handled. But I'm more than happy to share it. And it's just that knowledge is power. You're trying to prepare people for the crummy situations that can happen with this service, right? Because it's not that you just lost Bob from accounting. You've lost someone that's really part of your team, your family. More about them, and
Right, you may not have that close of a relationship.
Right.
It's a different repercussion.
Yeah, for sure. So you spoke of us being a different animal within the city. Well, that's it. That's
Right.
the nail on the
That
head.
nails it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned you've been a part of numerous funerals as an honor guard member.
Mm-hmm.
When did you get involved in that? What drew you to that? You seem to see a lot of things and say yes to things. And do it well, I got to say.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So when did that come into your life and your career?
Yeah, I liked the marching right out of recruit class.
Which not a lot of people do.
No, I know. And Jordan was, I think he came right out of recruit class onto the honor guard, but he had a bit of a military background. I looked up to that as well. I was like, well, if he can do it, maybe I can too. So it took a bit of time. I expressed my interest, but I would start going out to practices, and it just was that moment in your life where you finally had the time in the day to go out and be a part of that. And then you started going to some events. And so I think it was like 2007 or 8, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I was a part of a lot of great things right off the bat with our honor guard, and we were going heavy into hosting the Canadian Fallen Firefighters in Ottawa, and that is a big scope in itself. We haven't had this conversation, which is surprising because we've talked about everything else, but if you went to that or not. And so the year before you host, you basically shadow the other department around, and they show you, from getting people at the airport, from doing dinners, handing out the helmets, etc. So you see it all, and then now you're doing it, so you're prepared.
Yeah, I went up on that trip.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, so logistically what
From the outside looking in, yes.
Of course. So it probably looked okay. I hope it did.
It looked amazing.
Sure it did. Meanwhile, we've been there for 5 days, kind of thing.
Calm on the surface, paddle like hell underneath. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a part of some pretty big events, and you're new to it, and you take on a lot as well. And not only are you doing an event like that, you're doing parades, which is amazing, or you're doing graduations. Those are amazing as well. But you're doing a lot of funerals. So
Within your department and outside of your department.
yeah, so I'd taken on a lot and went to a bunch, and that was all good. And then we had, a string there for 7 or 8 months where we lost 5 members, kind of thing, retired and active. We were all reeling from it as an honor guard, and I can recall those moments, and it was like, holy man, we're just holding it together here.
And peer support on top of that.
Yeah,
So
that got thrown into there as well.
you jumped in with 2 feet into this and dedicate yourself like you do with the things you do, and
yeah,
it takes a toll.
it does. And I've had to kind of step back a little, just out of sheer busyness more than anything. Not that I don't want to jump in anymore, but and I will. But we've got 3 kids at home, and
It's not like you're a not involved kind of guy.
Right. Yeah. So there's only so much time and energy that you can put and devote to continually drive down to do stuff. So it's a pretty awesome thing to be a part of, and I will get back to it, but it does play a mental game on you for so many different reasons. And you go to a police funeral where they've got little kids there, and you have little kids too, and it's like, oh my gosh, you're barely holding it together, right? But you do what you do to serve your department and pay respects in that regard too. So,
And you realize pretty quickly, and I think other people need to acknowledge as well, that for us, paying our respects and walking up the line and then going off to have a coffee and chat with people is different than standing there on guard
doing it
for minutes, hours at a time.
and the lead up, the visitation, the funeral, the whole, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
As much as you're rotating around, your mind is in it
Yeah.
on a professional level.
Yeah.
To pay respect in a whole other realm.
Yeah.
Than we are just as friends and colleagues coming up.
The rewarding part of it is listening to the feedback when someone says, "Boy, you guys look pretty good up there." You do. You're in the worst scenario, but you looked professional and
Right.
you're represented that way, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
And you did, your brother or sister, right?
Yeah.
So you also understand the loss of our members from a union side of things with the Benevolent Committee.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
Benevolent Committee in terms of what we do association-wise is, you're looking after those beneficiaries or potentially handing money over. It's usually from the president to the surviving spouse. So you may have dealt with them anyways if it was a related illness or not, and then you see it all the way through right to the end of it. So whether I was there representing as an honor guard or not, it's played a long role out too, right? Some of our members, it was 8-9 months. You knew where it was going to go and it wasn't getting any better. And then you're finally dealing with the end of it. So yeah, it's a smaller role, and it was my initial introduction to the association. So many years back, 12 years back, whatever like the time I've been there, somewhere in that range. But then it's moved into the WSIB side of it, and that's a way more significant role. So that has its mental pound down on you as well. It's a lot. It's heavy. I've talked to lots of other members that have been in that role, and it's got a bit of a lifespan too because it is heavy.
We talked about how looking back at our own experiences sort of prepares us to help others.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked last night, just touching on this briefly, what we were going to cover, how we both experienced injuries earlier on in our careers.
Yes.
You were a year on, I was 2 years on, and the overwhelming thought of, I just got here and this might end what I've fought so hard to get. And we talked about maybe some of the missteps that we made and how we could have, partially to our own detriment of just being proud and also not wanting to be off the trucks. And part of it out of ignorance of not knowing the system well and maybe not paying attention as much as we should have to that initially WSIB talk that happened in recruit class because we just wanted to put out some fires. But we didn't necessarily navigate it ideally. So how did you handle it when you got injured? And then how did you learn from that? What can we talk about right now that would help people navigate their experience better and help us help them, help you help them, and how can they help themselves? Talk to me about some of the frustrations and missteps that you had and that you're experiencing with being in that role now.
My own experience being on a year and a bit and going to a major fire, one of the bigger ones in the city, where 24 homes went down, and I wrecked my back lugging a 65 around in the mud, but I didn't know, and started shuffling after. It was like, oof, something's wrong with my lower back here, and way better now, and you just learn a lot and take care of it, etc. But
came in the next shift.
Yeah, try and limp yourself in, and it's like, oh man, you shouldn't. I should have just addressed it right then and there. It was
Your captain noticed it, right?
My officer noticed it because I was struggling to even put my gear on, and he's like, "What is wrong with you?"
Right.
Well, there's a lot wrong with me right now. So, but we ended up doing the paperwork, and I was off for 3.5 months type thing. But coming back on light duties and the administration side of things, because that's what we had.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've, and not anything for my credit, but for members before me, we've evolved so much in terms of how we're handling members in their cases on modified duties. They can come back on shift and all these amazing things. So
Whereas before you were put on straight days.
you were on straight days,
and
you
they
were
found
upstairs.
a make work project for you.
Yep. So it was a way different animal. But a lot of self-doubt happens. I just had this conversation with one of our members too. It's almost a peer talk because they're hurt or are hurt and they're questioning, am I going to be better? And I walked them right through the same path. I said, look, this happened X amount of years ago, and this is kind of how I remedied it, and you will get better. You'll be okay. Like, it's going to take time, but you will be better. I know where you are. You're in a dark spot because you don't think the job will ever not be there. And then you get hurt, and now you're doubting if you can even do it again.
But 3 months or a year out of 30 years
Right.
is a drop in the bucket
Yeah.
if you do it right.
Right.
But you and I and many others rush back in
Or try to.
and exacerbate it, lengthen it.
Yeah. And it's different when it's work related versus not, a little bit in terms of the paperwork that's coming in. But mark those events, fill out the injury reports accordingly, and now
as soon as possible.
Yeah, ASAP. And we have something to draw on at that point in time, as opposed to backpedaling and trying to catch up afterwards, because it's not so much the city that's going to cause gray hairs. It's WSIB. They're an insurance company. So whether they approve or deny is all dated to the injury itself, right?
And you think a lot of the reluctance for people to dive into the system is they're afraid of the system? They don't want to deal with the stalwart.
Yeah, or they're don't want to up the apple cart. They don't want to be seen as weak or whatever it is. And then those delays just cause headaches, and it doesn't get anybody any further ahead. So mark the event, mark what happened, seek medical attention. All those things are checked and in place, and the rest will, whether you get better, the next shift, or who knows, it takes months. If you got whatever, you could get an infection for all you don't know. It doesn't have to be a strain or sprain or whatever it is. It could just be a simple infection, and you could be out for 4 or 5 months. You don't know. So those are important things, and try and lean on myself or any of the association executive for the advice, because that's what we're there for. That's what you're ultimately paying us for, and none of us mind doing anything. We'll do whatever it takes to help facilitate those returns, right?
To highlight the fact that you can't separate the mental impact from the physical impact. We've done post-incident discussions with crews, and we've heard word for word that, well, I was just going to take some time off and then eventually speak up about this, where it's luckily we caught that in time and we were able to get someone on the right path early on, because backpedaling, even though they had the best of intentions, it just makes life so much more difficult for them and for you.
Yeah, there's your way of thinking about it, and there's the way that we should probably go about it. So whatever you've got crafted up in your mind as to how you want to get back, whether it's physical or mental injury, let's just have a conversation about what's going on here and get the right things in place, because it just saves a lot of headache down the way. So
it's tough because you have to release a lot of control and put a lot of trust in someone that you just handle your case and trust that they've got your best interests at heart and is going to work with you, speak for you, be an advocate for you.
But getting that person to the right care, mentally or physically, and getting them back to work 100%, that's the payoff. Mental health being such a front runner in it right now. If our members are struggling or suffering, and they can come back and have lived that journey of treatment, etc., and they're back to a full capacity, that speaks volumes.
And sometimes, that experience brings them back better than they were before they got hurt.
For sure, yeah.
All of a sudden they realize how they have to take better care of their body and their mind.
Yeah, and they're really dialed into the job more so than they ever were. Physically, mentally, maybe they're a better employee, and you hope that's ultimately what you hope. You just hope the best of your whole membership.
I'm not sure who it's attributed to, but a quote I read recently said, if you don't take care of your body, where are you going to live?
Yeah, there you go. It's going to be 30 years. Takes a little piece of you from day 1 to day 30 or 35, and don't think differently that it won't. You're there to serve people So physically, it can break you down. Mentally, it can break you down. But live that journey, and you're part of a great service, and be proud of that. But you got to take care of number one for sure, and both those regards.
So to build on that, before we finish up, what would your advice be to those that are trying to get on the job, to rookies that just got on, to the 10-year, to the 20-year, seeing your own path and now seeing others? If you could just give me some thoughts along those benchmarks.
Yeah. So again, I've tried to mentor some guys around me in regards to trying to get on the job, and it's just been, don't give up. It's worth that. The difficult road to get here, and that'll eventually pay off. But that's within their own person. I can't make them do courses or whatever it is. They've got to have the desire to do it. As a rookie, gravitate to the senior firefighter and learn everything you can. It does matter about the chores, etc., but it matters about the job. You're not going to learn all of the job in the first month or two. You may be thrown a few wild cards right away, but those things, that creates you, and that makes you realize that you need your skills there, and they need to be sharp, and you need to be training and learning and have those ears open all the time to learn every little idiosyncrasy about the job that you possibly can.
Well, humility is the key factor there.
It still is for me, right? I'm trying to be humble. I'm not perfect at my own role, but I certainly try and give 110 every day. The actors, I think we've spoken about, don't think that because you've written an exam that you're going in to have all the answers, and that every call is going to be, super smooth. And it's good to be humble. It's good to learn and still learn, and don't be afraid to reach out to somebody that has some more years on, and maybe you can draw off of their experience and how they might do something different. So having that open mind and being humble is huge. For the senior firefighter, well, you know what it's like. The years go by so quickly, and the job is forever changing, and you've got to bring that to the table and bring that spark, and you definitely do, and our crew does too, and I'm thankful for that, because it's those people that are surrounding me that allow me to do my job without having to micromanage everybody else, right? That's a huge thing, and it should be a good attribute to a senior firefighter, but it's not always the case. I know the job can wear you down, but if it's time for a change and refresh your career, then do that, because there's a lot to give back, and I think that's the most important part.
And what about those thinking moving up into a district chief, platoon chief, admin positions?
Still stay true to your values no matter what it is, because you've come from usually a captain's position in some regard, I guess a manager in some regard. Look to try and take care of the people that you looked after anyways, and just broaden the scope. You're going to look after a shift or a platoon or a district or whatever it is. Still have that best interest in mind. Think there can be a lot to be delivered in terms of their knowledge and how they see things and their approach, and training and doing incident command and that sort of thing. They can give a lot back in that regard too. So I think those are important. To me, you're always giving back. You're always training and passing on the knowledge that those years have provided you. So be true to that.
And can we do better at putting our egos aside and holding ourselves and other people accountable?
We can certainly try. Yeah.
Sometimes something as simple as, we've talked about it, we're the crew before with really no reason, truck's a disaster.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have left it like that.
Sure.
And then there's always this sort of pause, like, well, should we say anything? We don't want to ruffle feathers. And
right.
Whereas we would hope that someone would say something to us.
You would. Yeah.
So I think we need to get better at that.
It would keep everybody in line a little bit.
On a professional level.
Right.
Without people taking it personally.
Right.
If we don't hold each other accountable, then no one's going to get any better.
Yeah, you can look at it in the corporate role too. If you had a company vehicle and you were passing it over day to day, and the guy brings it back and the tires are flat, well, you probably want to say something to him.
Right.
Right.
Or at least ask why.
Right.
And figure it out.
You ran over a speed belt, did you?
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking.
I appreciate it.
I think that went a little bit smoother than you thought.
I'm humbled to be here.
Everyone worries about it, and then once we get into it, it's great.
No, I really do appreciate it. So
cool. All right.
you.
I appreciate you being here. All right. Talk to you soon.